Welcome to a different little Halo Wars 2 video. I just have something I want to talk about as far as how this game has been going lately. For me, just my experience and how much fun I'm really having with it, and this mostly pertains to how the meta is right now. So I just want to start by saying I don't really think there is a meta right now, and controversial as that might seem, there isn't one leader that is truly above the rest. The last meta we had was just Jerome was the best. There was no real counter. He just was a monster. And then the hotfix came out, and now we're to a point where people are agreeing that like Shipmaster's the best, but then there's people that think Arbiter's the best. There's all sorts of different theories about who is the best like leader, but realistically, like there just isn't a meta right now. I've seen so many different combos of leaders used against myself in ranked play, and team war you're always going to see all sorts of weird stuff, but like even in ranked play I've seen some Johnson play because Johnson can like heal his units. I've seen still a lot of Jerome. I've seen some really great Arbiter play. I can remember a game recently where this Arbiter, I didn't see any of these units anywhere. I was scouting and I couldn't find his units, and then I was like, maybe he just doesn't have an army, and I push up, and we're starting to push up, and all of a sudden I just get a whole army of enforcers teleported behind my base at like the 8-minute mark. And because they were upgraded already, they weren't as easy to kill as they would normally be. So they just wiped out my base, and that was basically game over right there. I'm not going to go into the whole breakdown of that game because I think we did end up pulling that one back, but it at least felt like game over. But either way, my original point is that it doesn't really feel like there's one leader that really stands above the rest. I love this as just a general gaming fan and an RTS fan. I love it because it gives every character its own viability, whether it's more viable or not. Every character has some sort of viability. You don't just have these characters that nobody touches because they have no use. Like now, it seems like every leader has some sort of use, whether it is more useful or not than others. But at the same time, I kind of hate it as much as I do love it. Like, I do kind of hate it, and a lot of that is just because it's hard to put into words, but it's nice to like know what works. Like it's nice to be able to go into a match and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this is going to kind of guarantee us some stability for the first part of the match, or this is going to really help our beginning push, like in Season 3 with choppers and like engineers. Like I Colony is my favorite character, and I could use Colony as much as I wanted because I could just get Engineer Swarm and Hunter's Brain and have choppers and engineers roll up, and it was I loved that meta because it was just like there was a good solid opener, even though for people it did get repetitive, and Aatrox was obviously annoying because he could grab every base he wanted, and the whole map would just be full of Aatrox bases with fortifications. And then you'd have shield generators where they just hide inside that. But the point was that like there were certain things that like you could rely on working. Now you just have no idea. Like you're just going into a game and hoping that your build is going to work, because if it doesn't, you're screwed. Like there's a match lately that we went into that we like had the advantage, and we pushed up to their base, and within like the first 3 minutes they already had Cyclopses, Hunters, and Banshees. Like immediately, just they knew every single counter that they needed to what we brought to their table in the first within the first 5 minutes. And they hadn't even scouted. They hadn't sent anything to our side, nothing. They just turtled up in their bases and just knew immediately what to make. That was pretty frustrating because then we were really behind, and they had they had good eco. We weren't able to really make a dent in anything because they already had our counters the moment we showed up. But that's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's good. It's good to have good competition, and like, you're not going to win every game, obviously, but it is kind of frustrating coming from a season where you knew what worked, to come into a season. And I mean, I've spent hours and hours trying to figure out what works, and like, I'm in college. I don't really have time to sit here all day and do it, but I'll try to play a handful of matches every day or every night, just to try to figure out what's going on. And I for the life of me cannot figure out what to do. So if you have suggestions for that, then please leave them, message me, all that stuff, tweet it to me, whatever works, because I'm a little bit lost right now. But what I have been seeing a lot, as far as shifting to the topic, back to the topic of what really is kind of the meta, it seems to be where you either get lucky with an early rush, or you make a huge army of counters and like nightingales. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've died because two armies roll up on my base of locusts, engineers, and reavers, and then you have the other army of cyclops, snipers, and nightingales. What are you supposed to do against that? They have a counter to everything that you have, and that has happened to me within the first like 10 minutes of the game. We'll go in and try to have a solid opener, and then we just have these armies roll up that have a counter to everything that we can put out at them. And some would say like, oh, we'll just get hunters and elite rangers or whatever. And it's like, I've literally tried to do that, to counter their counter so many times, but elite rangers are squishy as hell. They cannot hit from as far away as snipers can, and cyclops are just stronger than hunters in their base forms. Like, hunters are okay, and cyclops, you take your pick, but cyclops are really strong. So again, take that as they may not be stronger, but from what I have been seeing, hunters have not been working for me very well. I try to do that ball of hunters and jackals, and it just are elite rangers. I played a lot of Halo Wars 1, so I still call them jackals. But either way, that's kind of what I've been running into the most. It's just kind of big balls of armies where it's just they can counter everything that you have, and you have nothing to do against it. And some people would say like use leader powers and stuff, and that's what I do. But the problem is when you're shipmaster, you can't really hurt them with any of your leader powers. You can just move them around or move your stuff around. But that's the one weakness, which I think I talked about that in the second breakdown video. That's kind of shipmaster's one weakness is once he's not on like the offense and he has to defend for himself, he breaks down. Because he just has a little glassing beam, and that's really it. There's nothing else that really works to damage. Whereas Atriox has eradication, and even Decimus has a bunch of stuff like Siphon and Vortex Lightning, and you've got Colony with Hunter's Brand, which is fantastic, and then all the humans have different types of bombs and stuff like. And then Shipmaster doesn't really have that, and obviously you want characters with diversity as far as leader powers go, so you don't want Shipmaster to just have the same old everyone else has. But that does become frustrating when I play Shipmaster, because if I get pushed back, it's almost a lost cause. Like, I can't rely on my leader powers too much, because displacement only moves them. It doesn't really stop them. It just buys me a couple more seconds. But what I will say is that upgrades right now, as far as upgrading your units, getting an advantage as far as upgrades go is huge. Which is, you're like, Isaiah, that's a no-brainer. But seriously, like having the ability, if you're able to put up like say 2 raid camps, having the ability to have 1 raid camp do upgrades, infantry upgrades, and then the other one actually pumping out units, that's really nice to have. And if you can afford to just be able to go infantry or just be able to go vehicles and be able to do that, then it's great, because having that upgraded advantage is huge. And that's what I've noticed is I'll run into, you know, like I'll run into those balls of enemies, and I'll be able to counter them at first, but because they had hurt my eco a little bit, I'm not able to use, especially when you're pumping out things that require both supply and power. Like, you run out of power so quickly in that sense, and you try to upgrade, but they're taking out your expos, and you don't have anything. It's just a little bit ridiculous, just trying to figure out how to counter all that stuff. But yeah, just upgrades are pretty huge. Just the standard upgrading your infantry and upgrading your air units and whatnot. It's pretty big. Scouting is still huge, but it's just really important to, like, the only way we've really been able to win is to be aggressive early on, and then like be able to take map control. That's the only way we've been able to win. If it's like an even game, we've been having a hard time winning. And I'm not sure why exactly that's been happening. I don't know if it's like just our, like, if we're really not, I don't know. I feel like we have a pretty good grasp on how this game works. I mean, we're both in higher ranks, and like we feel like we know how the game works, but there's times where we're like, okay, we have the advantage, and then we go in and get demolished, and we're like, how did that happen? Like, how did all of our units die when they were direct counters to what was brought to us? But I mean, that's just how it works, man. Like, you're never really gonna know what's gonna happen. I mean, for all we know, like, they could have, way more upgrades than us, or something like I'm just kind of blabbering at this point, but I mean, it's overall just hard to really figure out what's gonna work and how it's gonna work. So all of that said, the game is still relatively fun, but it is a little bit frustrating right now because a lot of the things we've been trying just haven't worked. But I mean, if you have thoughts, if you have suggestions, thoughts, any feedback, if you think I'm just a bambling idiot who doesn't know anything what he's talking about, feel free to put that down in the comments. Let me know how you feel about it, because I'll if you're not a doucher, I'll reply, and I'll take your criticisms, and anything that's gonna help, I'll gladly hear, because right now I'm not really sure what works. So that's all I got for you today. But thanks for listening if you do, and I'll catch you in the next one.
We must re-examine our tactics carefully.